This is the Griffin Podcast, episode number 90. We're in our buyer plan, and the question on the table is, does having representation matter? Are you a home seller or a home buyer who has questions about selling or buying residential property? Or maybe you're an agent who needs a plan, but you can't find an easy way to get your answers? Well, then, hey, you're all in the right place. I'm Danny Griffin, the founder of The Griffin and the host of the Ask-A-Griffin podcast. And to help you take immediate action to get started in the right direction, if you're a seller, buyer, or agent, you can take advantage of our free step-by-step guides that are waiting for you at griffincourses.com. That's Griffin courses.com. All right, let's get started. We're in the buyer plan this week, and the question on the table is, does having buyer representation matter to a home buyer? The first point here is, well, you have to really start with why this is even an important subject, and that's because you should not assume as a buyer that you know how the buying process works. I think that's a really important thing that I recognize. When I reset my business about 10 years ago, trying to orient towards the consumer, you get a consumer perspective and you say, if I'm going to enter into the world of helping buyers, in this case, sellers and agents, what is it that I recognize that they don't know? And that's really the process. That's what it is. I mean, every buyer has a concept that there are listings out there, and especially these days, the listings, the access is almost instantaneous. If you have an app on your phone or you just want to go to your browser on your phone, you can look for homes for sale in whatever geography you want. Voila, you are in action. But that's not the buying process. That's just access to homes. So the idea here is to really kind of collide into your thinking and say, look, I'm thrilled that that sort of access from a consumer-facing experience is there. It makes the process of buying a home a little bit more enjoyable. It's a little bit more fun, and it's a little bit easier to start because, like I like to say, once you get a seedling of thought that you might want to buy a property, you can jump online and you can begin to peruse. And you can make it a little bit of a game, and it's fun, and you're curious, and you're voyeuristically looking into these properties and seeing how people really live in these properties, and what would it be like if it was yours. I mean, that's great, but it just doesn't teach you the entire process. So that's the second point here is you as a home buyer don't know what you don't know, so of course guidance matters. Now again, little fine line when I say the word representation. Some of you might bristle and say, I can do it on my own. I've bought houses before. I get it, but I'm just asking even you at the extreme to humor me. Let's just talk about guidance, because this guidance on this podcast is 100% free and it's no obligation. And it's meant to teach and train you how to understand this so that even if you still say, I'm going to self-guide and self-represent, great. But you don't know what you don't know. And there is a process to buying a house that, as a pro guide, a professional guide, and a professional representative of hundreds and hundreds of buyers over a very long career, I'm sharing with you that guidance about how the process works matters. If I were to break this down for you, and we have a buyer plan that you can get a copy of at griffincourses.com. If I were to break it down for you, the very first thing that I tell you about the process is to consider guidance or representation, because it's not just about finding a property online. That's not what it is. So as much as we've made that easy in our industry and we've given that information away in the information world, right, that we live in, has made it, really has demanded that we do that. We haven't had any choice to keep it hidden from the public anymore. Nothing really is hidden anymore. So the idea is that you might perceive that you just go look there and you use that app for an open house and you show up and you buy a property, but that's not true. Because what you really haven't even considered is why. And a good representative or guide asks you, whoa, wait, before you go out and buy a house, why are you thinking about buying it all? And is it even a real reason? And if it is or seems like a real reason on a scale of 1 to 10, how motivated are you right now? Because on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being the most motivated, 1 being the least, if you're not somewhere around a 9 to 10, then and your why isn't there, well, then what are you going through this process for? right? See what I mean? Now, you wouldn't have thought that. You might start dabbling and you see your friends and people that are buying and you just assume, oh my gosh, everything's going up. I should buy something because I'm doing this podcast in the middle of a hot market that's beginning to cool. Whoa, slow down. Don't get sucked up into the vortex of buying without asking yourself why. So here I am as an online guide saying, you better ask yourself why you're going to buy a property and how motivated you are right now or very soon to do so. Because that's going to require you to prepare for the process of buying, which means getting your financing in line. I know I'm paying cash, says the cash buyer. I'm paying cash and I know what I. Well, have you really decided how much cash? And have you talked to the banker so that there's a letter that says you can complete a cash transaction within a period of time? Because you're going to need that during negotiation. Seller doesn't know you. And you can't get your dander up when all of a sudden the seller says, well, I don't know who you are. So what if it's cash? Prove it. Well, what do you mean? Are you questioning me? Yes, I am. You want me to take my house off the market for you? See what I mean? I could go on and on and on about the process. Why are you doing it? How motivated are you? Good. Let's get your financing in order, whether it's cash or if it's a mortgage, you really need to get started with getting vetted by a mortgage broker or a bank to see where you stand financially. And that all happens well before full underwriting, which requires you to put a house under agreement. But before we can do that, now that the money's in line, let's see what that money just bought recently, because you're motivated now. Remember, you have a real why. You have a real motivation as a buyer. Here we are. Okay, so now let's see what that money bought. Now let's go tour. Let that sink in, what I just did there. I just proved to you that you don't know what you don't know about the home buying process when it's put in its correct order for the ultimately best experience. There are major things that must be put in order. So consider that. Consider that lesson right there that I began with. And that doesn't even begin to get into once you're touring and then you're writing offers and negotiating, then you're closing the property. Oh my goodness, it is complicated. And you don't just shuffle it off. By the way, I'm going to give you all a caveat. What makes a home buyer think that they don't need proper guidance and representation is usually intellectual insecurity. And that comes from the entire spectrum of academic background. Some people who don't have academic background appreciate guidance more than those that have PhDs and MDs, etc., who think they have to be a know-it-all and just can't humble themselves. So don't be intellectually insecure when you're going to buy a property. You want to look for somebody who can put the process in order for you, right? It's real important. And the last point I'll make here is that people get worked up about actually formally getting with a buyer agent. But what they don't realize is the third point here is that buyer agent compensation is actually built into the real estate marketplace through the multiple listing service. So presuming, and there are some presumptions here, presuming that you are dealing with a real estate agent who is a member of a local multiple listing service and who is going to have access to all those listings, and believe me, that's what you want. Those are the majority of the listings, not the off-market stuff that's being sold for sale by owner. That's a very tiny percentage of the marketplace. I'm not saying that there aren't some great deals there, and I'm not saying an agent can't help you there as well. But really, and I'm not going to speak for the buyer agents out there, some might charge an upfront fee, but for the most part, the way compensation is handled on the buyer agent side of this is that when a listing agent lists a property at X%, they often offer through the multiple listing system 50% plus or minus, right? 50% of that compensation to a buyer's agent who brings a ready, willing, and able buyer. And why is that important? Because 88% of the time, a property is sold from a buyer agent to a seller agent from two completely different firms, 88% of the time. So this is not new, folks. Guidance and representation happens all the time in the majority. All right, let me go back and summarize this. We're in the buyer plan, and the question is, does having a buyer representation matter, right? Yes, it does. And the points are, don't assume that you know how the buying process works. You might know how to find properties, but you don't know how the entire process works. That's what a guide can help you with. So remember, you don't know what you don't know. And that guidance to help you fill in those blanks, even if you know a lot, You don't know everything, and a guide typically knows more than you do, so they can fill in the blanks. And third, buyer agent compensation is already built into the real estate marketplace through MLS. So it's not like it puts you out. I mean, it's quote unquote your money buying the property, but the representation itself is really mostly in this industry free until a deal's consummated, and that's the deal that you wanted. So why wouldn't you want representation? All right, I'll summarize it this way. The modern day home buyer assumes too quickly that they know exactly how the home buying process works. The idea that accessing homes online is the first and best step is inaccurate. Home buying best practices include connecting with a buyer's agent who will help you navigate the entire process versus simply identifying those properties online or in the field. Furthermore, buyer agency is easy. It's really easy to contract with somebody like this because it's as little as a disclosure, and compensation is primarily built into the marketplace, which really mostly requires no upfront fees unless it's a buyer agent that charges that, and maybe they're worth it, and maybe you should consider that too. All right, remember, you can take immediate action to get started in the right direction if you're a seller, a buyer, or an agent who wants help by going and getting a copy of our free step-by-step guides. These are the what-to-do guidance plans, representation for free, waiting for you at griffincourses.com, Griffin courses.com. By the way, it will do exactly what I talked about in the podcast. It will put the process in order for you so that you can see how it really works. Also, don't forget, you can subscribe to this very podcast on iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you listen. We also post our content on YouTube. So don't forget to subscribe to the Griffin channel, the Griffin channel. We'd also appreciate it if you would share our content with home sellers and buyers or maybe real estate agents that you know so that they all get the help that they need. But remember this, we sign off the podcast the same way every time. Nobody's coming for you, folks. Absolutely nobody. So go get to work on a plan for buying or selling your next home or becoming a real estate agent or becoming a better real estate agent. And we will obviously see you in the next episode to help you do just that. Thanks again.